Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the 6th Annual SDG Business Forum here at the 2nd Annual Uniting Business Live, hosted by the International Chamber of Commerce, UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and United Nations Global Compact. My name is Maggie Lake, and I'm honored to be your host and MC for today's event. Today's SDG Business Forum is the largest and most globally representative UN convening of business leaders, highlighting companies that are using their influence as a positive agent of change in their local communities and across the world. Today's events, being convened on the margins of the 76th UN General Assembly, is a platform for all stakeholders to come together for meaningful dialogue on the role of the private sector in addressing the current economic landscape and to co-create lasting solutions for a more sustainable future. You can follow all the action right here and on social media using the hashtag SDG Biz Forum. Now, once again, we are thrilled to have you here on our interactive event platform, and I encourage you to take some time to use its many exciting and innovative features, including the event chat, which is located on the right side of your screen. Be sure to say hello to the other attendees and mention where you're from. We've made it easy to connect with your fellow attendees. You can see them in the attendee tab, also on the right side of your screen. You can send private messages and even invite them for a video chat. The networking section is in the navigation bar, and it enables you to connect over video with other attendees and make new connections. You can even share contact information. Give it a try. You might make some new friends. Now, there is an expo area that you should definitely visit. Our 9 sponsors will be showcasing their sustainability work and hosting their own live sessions. Be sure to use the links to find more information on each company. So as you can see, we've worked hard to put together an innovative, engaging, and informative virtual event. So please take the time to explore the full range of opportunities to learn, engage, and network. Now let's get started. And now to open the SDG Business Forum, it is my great pleasure to welcome the Honorable Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, United Nations.
I'm pleased to take part in the 6th Annual Sustainable Development Goal Business Forum. I want to thank leaders from the corporate world and governments for joining us to focus on challenges and much-needed solutions for resilient supply chains, just energy transitions, and financing for the 2030 Agenda. As the world continues to confront the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, and a host of other interrelated global tests, I want to highlight 3 areas for action where the private sector has a critical role to play. First, we must ensure universal access to COVID-19 vaccines, tests, and therapeutics. Second, we must work together to build a resilient and inclusive society grounded in people-centered policies. This includes support to micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Third, we must act now to address the climate crisis and accelerate the sustainable energy transition around the world. Thank you once again for your engagement and commitment. Let us work together to build a better tomorrow for all.
Thank you, Secretary General. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and friends, I'm delighted to welcome you to the 2021 SDG Business Forum on this 3rd and final day of this year's Uniting Business Live. On behalf of the United Nations Global Compact, let me begin by thanking the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the International Chamber of Commerce for partnering with us on this forum. In fact, our 3 organizations have successfully co-convened the SDG Business Forum for 6 years running. It comes at a time when the world is still grappling with the impact of COVID-19, not only on lives, societies, and economies, but on global progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. Even before the pandemic, the world was off track to achieve the 17 SDGs by the end of this decade. Nor were we making adequate progress on the climate agreement. In many ways, the COVID crisis has set us back even further. Social and economic inequalities are widening around the world. Women face a vast, stubborn economic gender gap. The digital divide still hinders access to information and opportunity. And greenhouse gas emissions and global warming are trending well above the limits set by the Paris Agreement. Meanwhile, we face a massive crisis in public health and human development. The pandemic has likely pushed tens of millions of people back into extreme poverty, the first such increase in global poverty since 1998. In this new normal, business as usual is not an option. Today's SDG Business Forum is an opportunity to look at what our better, more inclusive, and equitable options are. It is a platform for asking the critical question: how can businesses build forward better, help advance the SDGs, and leave no one behind in the recovery from COVID-19? One clear answer is to sign on to the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, which provide a pathway to doing business responsibly and sustainably. But to build forward better, the private sector also requires a coordinated international plan based on these 10 principles and the SDGs. We urgently need such a plan to support companies impacted by the pandemic, especially severely affected small and medium enterprises, to limit further economic disruption in every region, notably in the Global South, to build business continuity for sustainable, inclusive recovery, which must also include real equity in vaccine distribution worldwide, and to help humankind avert the worst impacts of a climate emergency that is becoming more evident by the day. These objectives are very much in step with the UN Global Compact's ambitious strategic plan for 2021 through 2023. The dialogue at today's forum will be informed by that strategic vision and by the dynamic discussions that we've had together over the past 2 days. Our agenda highlights some of the issues that are key to the future of sustainable development, and these include the central role of micro, small, and medium enterprises, the imperative for a just transition to clean, net zero energy production, and the massive potential of sustainable finance. On this last point in particular, it is worth noting that finance is one of the biggest impediments to moving on the sustainability agenda, but it is also an area of almost unlimited potential. The industries and technologies needed to unlock a just, climate-smart future represent the biggest business opportunities of our time. This is where companies and investors should be looking to maximize both their positive societal impact as well as their bottom line. Therefore, in the interest of business and society alike, and of the precious planet that we share, let us use our time well today. Let us meet this moment with our best ideas in a spirit of cooperation over competition. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it is that our collective health and prosperity depend on us working together. Despite the unprecedented challenges that we face, I am optimistic about what our global community can accomplish when we put our minds and our hearts into it, united in the business of a better world. Thank you. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce His Excellency Josaia Bainimarama, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Fiji.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bulabinaka from Fiji. Your Excellencies, there's no question the race to 2030 is off to a rocky start. The unequal impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has left a chasm between developing nations and the SDGs. Even as that inequity intensifies in front of our eyes, fast-acting and affordable development finance remains choked in bureaucratic backlogs, leaving proven means of recovery underfunded. Let me spell that out, what that means for our partners in the private sector. When it comes to sustainable development across the Global South, opportunity has been left on the table. Sustainable development is the opportunity of our lifetime. It is the only foundation strong enough to ensure business continuity, market security, and supply chain stability in a world that will face unprecedented challenges in the decades to come. The private sector's role is about far more than dollars and cents. It is about technology, about innovation, knowledge, and delivery platforms that can drive the 2030 agenda across markets from advanced countries, throughout the frontiers of the Global South, and towards small states like Fiji. The problem is that developing nations have been left on the margins of the largest influx of capital in history. Trillions in stimulus has been injected into advanced economies that were already leaps and bounds ahead of us, while investment in our nations remains muted. Sustainable development progress has been the ultimate casualty of that unintended injustice. For nearly 2 years now, the buck has stopped with governments to keep our economies afloat. We are exhausting every financial tool we have to prevent socio-economic catastrophe from consuming our countries. And we've been punished for it by a global financial system that empowers the wealthy and entrenches vulnerability. Small states, due to inherent geographic and economic vulnerabilities, are limping into the new normal, hobbled by antiquated measures of debt sustainability, high interest rates, and a lack of innovation in stagnant frameworks of development finance. This forum can signal a paradigm shift, a shift that sees governments and the UN working hand in hand to de-risk private sector investments in the SDGs, a shift that signals certainty through access to concessional development finance and spurs investments that benefits the private sector and the planet, and a shift that brings the SDGs and the hope they represent back within our reach. Fiji and other small island developing states are asking that climate finance be scaled up at least twofold and made available on the basis of vulnerability. We are calling on multilateral financial institutions to develop ultra-long-term concessional financing arrangements. We support the development of a multidimensional vulnerability index that is fit for the purpose of addressing the structural challenges small island developing states face, including the worsening impacts of climate change. To those joining us at the SDG Business Forum, my ask is simple: work with us. Small island developing states are incubating innovation that serves people and the planet and that can bring benefit any business bold enough to enlist alongside us. Fiji was one of the first developing countries to issue a green bond to bring in private sector investments to drive green ambition, including our 30 million tree planting commitment. And we intend to issue the first blue bond next year in support of a sustainable blue Fijian economy. With the Green Climate Fund, we set up our first photovoltaic agricultural investment in partnership with the private sector. And we have also brought the private sector on board with our urgent work to conserve our coral reefs and keep them not just alive, but pristine. Together with the UN's SDG Fund, the UN CDF, and the UNDP, we have launched the first parametric insurance scheme in the Pacific. We are relocating communities and building resilient infrastructure that protects the progress we have made from being swept away by climate change and climate-related disasters. By blending finance and catalyzing private sector investors, Fiji has shown that what makes sense for the environment, for people and for communities, can make solid business sense as well. So our challenge to this forum is simple. Join us, and let's get in the business of sustainable development together. Let's put the SDGs back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. A simple but powerful message. Work with us. Sustainable development is the opportunity of a lifetime. Now, let me welcome another sustainability champion, CEO of Mastercard and chairman of the International Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Ajay Banga.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to address the SDG Business Forum once again in my capacity as chair of the International Chamber of Commerce. a year ago, I spoke to the fact that business as usual was over. I said that we can no longer hope to thrive as businesses if we do not help our communities and planet thrive as well. And in the years since then, I think we've seen leaps of progress, setbacks of all kind, and frankly, anything but business as usual. For one, we continue to battle an evolving virus. And I applaud the work that has been done so far. Governments with the resources to weather this pandemic are moving mountains and parliaments to look out for their own populations, while also supporting countries that have had no choice but to bear the full brunt of the health, economic, and social consequences of this global crisis. We've also seen extraordinary relief efforts from governments, organizations, and individuals alike when caseloads in various regions have reached overwhelming numbers. But equitable vaccine distribution is nowhere near where it needs to be to put COVID in its place once and for all. Even with G20 level commitments to vaccine sharing and contributions from independent organizations like the Mastercard Foundation's $1.3 billion in support for vaccine distribution across Africa, even with all these efforts, there's still a long road ahead of us. The reality is that we are all inextricably connected and only as strong as our weakest link. The ICC Research Foundation report on vaccine equity projects $9.2 trillion of losses in GDP should governments fail to ensure developing economy access to COVID-19 vaccines. This pandemic will end for no one until it ends for everyone. And I fear that this past year, with its ebb and flow of travel restrictions and lockdowns, has revealed how much the international policy agenda relies on in-person meetings for consensus, for progress. But the challenges of the world will not wait for the pandemic to end. If anything, the pandemic is amplifying them. And that means we cannot afford to wait either. It is our job as advisors to industry and governments to peek around the corners in terms of uncertainty, set a path, and push forward. Now, peeking around the corners, seeing what's coming, that starts by training our eyes to see and understand the world through the lens of a triangle of considerations. On one side, there's inclusion, how we find ways to level the playing field for everyone, regardless of their gender, their background, their skin color, or anything else. On the other side, there's sustainability. This is about how we work with nature instead of against it. And at the base is the element that keeps the other two from crashing down. And this is the trade-off between short-term and long-term thinking. This is how we put the incentives for action and possible impacts into perspective. Now, setting the path then becomes a matter of real cooperation and commitments to equality and inclusion, climate change, and sustainability. And the push forward is where we do the hard work of addressing these issues by going after them with coordinated and collaborative solutions. And that starts with difficult conversations that will change the way we've always done things, but will create new ways of doing things that are more inclusive, more sustainable. When we do that, we can actually build a WTO of the future rather than just talk about the future of the WTO. We can remove the regulatory barriers to equitable vaccine distribution. We can lay the groundwork for shared and consistent standards for the climate, for trade, and for deeper international cooperation. Each of these, in turn, paves the way for a strong planet, stronger people, and therefore stronger possibilities for us and our children. But none of this will happen if we don't first put our shoulders to the wheel together. Bring our capabilities, resources, ingenuity, technology, capital to the table and get to work. Friends and colleagues, the time for pomp and ceremony is over. The time for rolling up our sleeves and putting the world back into motion on a better track is right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Banga. A triangle of consideration with inclusion and sustainability as the guiding principles. What a wonderful framework to use as we discuss the changes that are needed to achieve the SDGs. And what a great start to the 2021 SDG Business Forum. Thanks to those of you that have joined us so far. Don't forget to keep the conversation going online by using the hashtag Uniting Business and SDG Biz Forum. I'd like to also welcome everyone joining us on UN Web TV. Don't forget you can still register for the full event in Hopin throughout the day.